Hello and welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I am Michael Dwojak here, joined by the Northwest Herald's Joe Aguilar. It's been a while, and we're back, and we're going to break down some spring football. So we're going to go over some things that kind of happened over the past probably 5 or 6 weeks. A lot of different fun things happened. We learned a lot of different things. You know, Joe, it's the OTA schedule, the mini camp schedule. We're still trying to figure things out with, Ben Johnson and his coaching staff and how they like to do stuff, what the Bears have on the roster. And, obviously, the pads aren't on. You're not going to get a full scale battle here or anything like that. Obviously, they're just learning a lot of different things. But I feel like this time of year is really interesting because, we're getting to know Ben Johnson a little bit more, how he likes to do things, his persona and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like, sure, maybe we didn't learn a lot about, is Caleb Williams going to throw for 4,000 yards, any of that kind of stuff. But I do think that we've learned a lot about how intense this coaching staff is going to be, how they're going to teach the details. And that was the biggest thing for me, at least, where it seems like this team is this coaching staff is very determined to break down the details and make sure that everyone knows what is expected out of them.
Yeah, a lot of attention to detail, and maybe some of the guys aren't used to it, quite frankly. We'll see. But I think this is one way for sure you find out who's coachable and who's in right off the bat. And then you kind of weed it out. But because not everyone's going to be bought in, there's probably going to be some people who are a little skeptical or people have to change some habits that weren't good habits. And we'll find out. But this is why you go through all this in March and April and May, and you're trying to figure it out. Not March, but after the draft and everything. So
Sure.
that's why you try to figure it out, and you still got time. But it's our job as media and as fans and anyone who watches football to overanalyze and overreact on one play or after day one. But there's still a lot of time to go before camp opens, and then certainly the season.
It seemed like the main word I feel like that from mini camp and OTAs was that details, right? Like literally,
Yeah.
I feel like everyone was like obligated. I don't know if they were actually, but it seemed like everyone was like getting paid by by how many times they said details in their press conference. Like every player talked about it, the coaches talked about it, and I think I think the biggest thing you can take from this spring period is everyone knows what the expectations are. And I think that, last year you heard a lot about, accountability. We don't know what we're kind of supposed to be doing and that sort of stuff. And I think the biggest thing you kind of saw out of all of this was, man, like everyone should know what's going on and everyone should know what's expected because it doesn't seem like Ben Johnson or any of his coaches, watching practices, I feel like a lot of people are talking about, Ben Johnson, he's on players. Dennis Allen is on players. Eric Bieniemy is on players. Like the coaches are on these players, and they're not doing it in like a disrespectful manner. Like they're not like chewing them out or anything. But like if they're making a mistake, like they're going to let them know about it, and they're trying to teach them and make sure that they're doing it better. And it's honestly just very different from maybe what we saw in the past regime in the past few years here.
Yeah, and it's the proverbial tough love, right? But I think they have to be careful. I'm sure they know this a lot better than I do. That tough love doesn't work for everybody. Some guys need it. Some guys need a pat on the back. So they have to figure that out too as coaches. Because we've heard, like even Eric Bieniemy, like why hasn't he ever gotten a head coaching job? Maybe he's too tough, and maybe that doesn't play after a while. And again, so they have to figure that out too, because all the F bombs and this is the detail. I mean, they're right, but some guys aren't going to react positively to that. So, but we trust at this point that they'll figure it out. And again, we still got some time.
Yeah, and it seems like this, obviously this time of year is like just learning, right? Like
Yep.
you're not creating,
For everybody.
schemes or
Yeah.
like game plans for like the Packers or anything like that. This time is just like try to learn about each other, and that obviously is like you mentioned, like some things might work. So whatever you do with DJ Moore might not work with Roma Dunze, right? If you're Antoine
Right.
Randall, and he talked about that, how you might have to treat him a little bit different than Luther Burden III. Like everyone is different. Everyone like is going to be treated probably in a different way, and coaches are learning that right right now. But yeah, I would agree that it's a lot of learning right now, and it's a lot of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that pretty much was the spring here. If you're joining us on YouTube, thanks so much for joining us. I see a lot of guys are in the chat chatting it up. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to comment in there. We'll talk about a lot of different things in this week's podcast. Joe, I want to start things off with the quarterback, right? Obviously, that's how the NFL works. That's how everything kind of goes into. If everyone cares about the quarterback, no matter what team you are in the NFL. And I obviously want to talk about the Caleb development and all that kind of stuff, but we haven't talked since obviously that those excerpts came out from the Seth Wickersham. Obviously, his book is going to be coming out in September. Obviously, we learned about all the the trying to figure out different ways maybe not to get to the Bears. And, Caleb addressed it, and I thought he handled it in a really well way. I think he was, he didn't wait for questions about it. His opening statement during OTAs was talking about, like, here, this is the situation. This is what actually happened. This is what isn't happening. And, I'm here now, and I'm like committed to winning with this team. Like, he talked about how, yes, he liked Kevin O'Connell a lot when he met with the Vikings, but that was his first meeting. And then when he came to the Bears, he told his family, okay, I'm going to turn this place around. Like, I'm committed to this. Obviously, I'm not, I think this has been very funny for me because I feel like everyone is like saying this isn't a story or it is a story. And like, I'm not trying to drag this on. But Joe, just what were your thoughts about it? And how did you feel like Caleb kind of handled the whole situation?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I thought he handled it well. Was it a story? Yeah, it was a story. I mean, and he had to know that when he spoke on the record with Seth Wickersham, who wrote the book on the quarterbacks, that this was going to become public at some point. So I thought he addressed it, and yeah, let's move on. And quite frankly, look, I mean, the people who've covered this football team for a long time, either as in media or on a larger base, the fan base, they know the situation here at quarterback. Like, this was not an attractive destination a year ago, and hasn't been for a long time for a quarterback. So if he had any reservations, who doesn't understand that? I mean,
Right.
and then you come into a situation where you had a coach who was really on the hot seat, and we kind of figured that. A lot of people thought Matty Eberflus had been fired after the season before that. So, I didn't think it was anything revealing. I mean, a kid's got his whole future at stake, and he's going to, analyze things as anyone would when he's in the position that he was. And look, was the dad too hands on? Sure, he was, and parents can be guilty of that. But I thought Caleb did the right thing. Look, he wants to be great. We've known that since before the Bears drafted him. He has gone on record saying that, and we know if you win in Chicago, especially being a Bears football player, whether you're the quarterback or the punter or the equipment manager, you're going to be a hero here. You're never going to have to pay for another meal in your life as long as you live. So, it's like any athlete in Chicago, whether you play for the Cubs, you play for the White Sox, the Blackhawks, what winning it does for you, how it cements your not only your legacy, but you're standing in this great city. So I didn't have a problem with what Caleb said. I'm glad if he didn't address it right off the bat to the media, that would have been a problem. But he did, and good for him.
Yeah, I think maybe some people gave him a hard time because he didn't. He talked to us, the second week of OTAs and not the first week of OTAs. I think the only thing that really did was just kind of drag out the story, right? Like if he talked about it the first week, we would have addressed it and just kind of moved on like we did when he did talk about it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think he handled it well, and I think I agree with you, and I think a lot of fans have this point. If you're fighting for your career, and a lot of these rookie quarterbacks only have like one opportunity, right? Like a lot of times if your first team doesn't work for you, like your career is kind of sunk. Obviously Sam Darnold has kind of come back, Geno Smith has kind of come back, but it's really hard to do if your first team doesn't really develop you the right way. So I mean, I don't blame Caleb for being like, listen, like this team has never developed a quarterback. Why? I am nervous about my career and my future and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think he handled it well. I think it was a story, but he addressed it. We can move on now. Obviously, he's committed to moving forward, and obviously learning Ben Johnson's offense, and that was the biggest thing that we for him over the spring. You know, I see this a lot. There's a lot of breakdowns of like how did so and so quarterback do in OTAs? He went 5 of 7 and 7 on 7. He went 6 and 6 out of 10 on 11 on 11s. I think it's really hard to kind of break down what is truly happening with these 7 on 7s and 11 on 11s because first of all, the quarterback isn't being pressured at all. No one has pads on. And the second thing is like I mean these players are learning a completely new offensive system. Like they didn't truly start going into things until the second day of minicamp. So it's kind of hard to get into the well, Caleb looked great here, Caleb looked bad there. Like Caleb looked like a quarterback who's learning a new system, quite honestly, for 4 weeks. What like for the practices that we were able to see, he made some mistakes, he threw some interceptions, he threw some nice passes. But I think the biggest thing was for me is watching how Caleb and Ben Johnson were developing and how they're kind of building together. And like there were times where Ben Johnson would stop a play because someone wasn't set up in the right play. There were some times where Ben Johnson would say, "Yeah, Caleb was slow on that. He needed to be quicker on that." And I think that's the biggest thing where it seems like Caleb and Ben Johnson are right now developing. They're kind of figuring each other out. And the biggest thing for me right now is this coaching staff is figuring out what Caleb can and can't do. And now they're going to take that information over the next month, and then they're going to create a playbook that is going to be like, all right, Caleb can roll off when he has pressure, and he'll be able to find so and so here if he needs to make a like second play. Caleb can't do this right now. Maybe we can work that in a little bit later in the year. I think that's the biggest thing right now, where this coaching staff is learning what Caleb can and can't do, and they're going to create an offensive playbook that obviously plays into his strengths.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, look, I get it. Reporters like yourself who are at Hallisall watching them on the field and going through drills, and you have to report it. Like, hey, Tremaine Edmonds intercepted Caleb on a pass that was underthrown. You put that in your notebook, and then you go on the radio and you report that too. I get it, but it's like over analyzing a veteran pitcher's first 2 innings in a spring training game. It's like the
Sure.
guy's maybe working on something. He's figuring it out. And in Caleb's situation, like you said, Michael, I mean, they're learning each other. And just because he underthrew a pass or overthrew a pass or didn't do the right thing doesn't mean it's going to happen on Monday night against the Vikings when it all matters again. So, look, what is it? Is it June now? Finally, we still got another month and
Right.
change to go before they open. So there's time. I mean, there's so much pressure on this kid, and maybe he won't be good this year. But my goodness, it's way too early. I mean, ESPN. Now look, and I get it too. They've got to have something to talk about. There's like there's more pressure on Caleb Williams than any quarterback in the NFL this year. Like, can we slow down and pump the brakes a little bit? I mean, my goodness. I mean, what the kid went through last year, and I'm not saying he wasn't at fault for a lot of the things that happened. A lot of the sacks, but not all of them, certainly. Some of the sacks, the overthrows, the deep balls weren't always great. We know what his flaws were. That doesn't mean he had a bad season. But my gosh, he had how many coaches? Two, and the coordinators getting fired, and the team was bad around him. So all said and done, I don't think he had a bad season. I thought it was good. It wasn't great. Of course, it wasn't great. But I thought he had a good season, and there's still a lot there to work with. And with everything they've done in the offseason, the arrow is pointing up. Doesn't mean it's gonna, they're gonna make the playoffs. But I just think we need to pump the brakes a little when we're evaluating for better or worse. And to me, it seems like there's a lot of worse because people are already ready to just chomping at the bit to call this kid a bust.
Yeah, I would
And I
agree,
like
and
that.
I think the biggest thing we heard this from Ben Johnson. I think it was on Tuesday in the last OTA before they broke. Maybe it was at the end of the week. I'm mixing up my practices, but the biggest thing that I think Ben Johnson had kind of said about Caleb was like, listen, we threw a lot at him. We threw long play calling. We threw out different plays at the line of scrimmage. We threw out like it basically they threw everything at Caleb and they wanted to see what he could do. And I one of the things I at least for now want to give Ben Johnson credit for is he's honest, right? Like he's not going to throw anyone under the boat. He's not going like under the bus. He's not like going to, personally go after players, but he will be honest and say like, you know, there are some things that Caleb did well, and there are some things that Caleb didn't do well. Like he's not trying to placate to the quarterback, but I think the biggest thing we kind of saw was, and the biggest thing that Ben Johnson kind of talked about is like Caleb is getting better in all facets. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is he perfect? Are they game one ready? No, far from it. Like, Ben Johnson said they are not ready for prime time, but they are getting there. And I think that's the biggest thing right now, where you're seeing those incremental improvements right now in the spring, like you kind of want to see. Sure, it's going to reach another level in training camp once the pads come on and you kind of get closer and you really need to start figuring things out. But it really seems like the duo, the obviously the most important duo for this organization right now, Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, they're figuring each other out. And it seems like for now, Caleb is taking the steps that he needs to in order to kind of prepare himself for the beginning of training camp.
No question. So yeah, but it is the most important relationship in the building there, right? Because they've got to figure it out. And I will say this about Ben Johnson: he's been, since we really knew nothing about him other than what we read or saw from afar, he's been very candid. And it's still the honeymoon, it's still
Sure.
summer, so the real pressure hasn't begun by any means. But I think he's been very candid. I think someone asked him, maybe it was you, Michael, who asked, who's been like a couple names who've been the biggest surprises,
Yeah.
and he mentioned names. I don't know if Matt Eberflus, I'm not picking on Matt Eberflus or any other coach would really necessarily mention guys by name, but he did. I think he brought up Dominic Robinson as a positive. Maybe he brought up somebody else, but I thought that was nice, and it seems like he's been very candid with the media, and instead of just being everything, close to the vest.
Sure. And, obviously it's easy to be candid in May as opposed to, after a loss, on a last second field goal or something like that. But I agree. He's been candid. And, you mentioned that obviously that question happened on Wednesday at minicamp. And I thought it was interesting. Ben Johnson, instead of just like being like, oh, so and so or whatever, he asked like, hey, can I get back? Like, ask me that question tomorrow and I'll think about it. And then the next day he like came out with 4 players. And I think that, sure, that's little. Does that mean that you're going to win games in the fall? No. Like obviously, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a fantastic coach, but I do think that it tells you a little bit about him, that he does care, that he's not trying to be a coach who's like, the media is our enemy, I'm not going to get anything out there. Like I think it tells you the kind of relationship that you're going to have. And obviously, like you said, it's the honeymoon period, so it's all good vibes for right now. We talked about Caleb, and I want to move on to probably one of the I'm going to put this together in a couple weeks, talking about like the biggest position battles heading into training camp. And obviously the biggest one right now is the left tackle spot. Braxton Jones has still not been out there. He is still recovering from a late season ankle injury. I think the expectation is, the last time Ben hasn't been asked about it, probably since like the owners meetings, but I think the expectation is for Braxton Jones to be ready for training camp. But Ozzy Trapillo, their second round pick, and Kieran Namagaji, their third round pick, have been splitting time. Every time we saw them at practice, it was literally, one day it was Karan, one day it was Ozzy, and they just switched off with the first team. And Ben Johnson said, you're not going to learn much. Like, these guys don't have the pads on. You're not going to get too much. Sure, you can look at the footwork, you can look at that kind of stuff, but they mostly split positions. But the reason I'm talking about this, I'm curious to know, Joe. I think the assumption is that Braxton will probably get the first team reps once he gets there, because obviously he's a starter. He's been there and done that. But it seems like this is going to be a full-on competition, and I'm really interested to see, does Braxton Jones like hold on and like keep his position, or does Ozzy kind of impress, and does he kind of go out there? Does Karan kind of rebound with the full off season and an ability to be healthy? Like, I think obviously like this is probably like the most important position battle that we're going to be watching for all of training camp.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just a great opportunity for both Ozzy and Karan, because if Braxton Jones was healthy right now, if the ankle injury never would have happened, he's probably getting he's getting first team reps. But this is their opportunity, the Bears coaches and Ben Johnson, to take a full hard look at Ozzy and Karan and see where they stand. And even if Braxton Jones does come back and he's healthy and he's back to his old form, was the old form good enough? So they've got an opportunity here, great opportunity, maybe serendipitously, I guess, in a way, to see what they have in the second round pick, and then last year's third round pick in Karan. So there's a battle game on. I think they're open to it. They're probably figuring, why not? and let's see, maybe they're looking at Ozzie saying, he's close and we can live with it, or they're thinking he's not close. Braxton right now, if Braxton is healthy, is the better football player. But that's a great opportunity for the coaches and for the two left tackles that we've seen there in camp with Ozzie and Karan.
Yeah, Rick asked earlier in the podcast, Ozzy is our LT, yes or no? It's way too early to tell you that. I would be lying to you, Rick, if I told you that I know one way or another. Um, I can tell you that everyone is going to get a fair shot, and that's going to be the biggest thing. I think Ben Johnson just wants to see, and obviously the whole coaching staff wants to see what they have at that position. And, can Ozzy is a smart kid. Karan is a smart kid. Like, obviously, they both went to good colleges, and that doesn't mean that they're going to be great football players, but it seems that they've have picked up the offense. They're learning what they're supposed to do. And I think it's just going to be a full-fledged conversation, or a conversation about who's going to go out there. And I know Braxton Jones, he he did not have the best year last year. There are a lot of times he was bull rushed. There are a lot of times that defenders were able to kind of get around him. But from what we heard from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson over the offseason, they still seem to believe in him. And obviously a lot of that stuff was said before they got Ozzie. But I do think that does Braxton Jones benefit from having Joe Tooney next to him? Like, does he benefit from having the interior of the offensive line being really stout? And maybe they can let, him make some more mistakes, or maybe he's not going to face as much pressure as he would have otherwise. I think there are a lot of factors into this. And I don't think it's as simple as saying as Ozzy's it or Braxton is it, or even Karan is it. I think it's going to be a full-fledged open conversation, or competition. And I quite honestly think all three guys have a really good opportunity at it. And if they don't, Darnell Wright is still an opportunity. Ben Johnson said, he was asked, is Darnell Wright, set at right tackle, and he said, for the time being, yeah, that's the plan, but we have the right to change that. So it really seems like they're doing a full-fledged whoever is going to be able to protect Caleb, that's where we're putting out there. It doesn't matter if you're a 4-year vet, you're a rookie, you're a second-year player. We had you rated high, low, whatever. It's very clear that they're going to look at all their options at the left tackle position, and they're just going to let the guys battle it out.
I think that's the way to do it here, right? I mean, they don't care what you've done in the past. They've seen film on Braxton, but I'm always curious. Like this is tough for Braxton because everyone knows he's got to get stronger. His base has to get stronger. But with this injury, how much has he been able to work on that? I don't know the extent of that. I mean, if your ankle is rehabbing, I don't know how much work you can do on your lower body. I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. I've never played offensive tackle, but I just wonder how much he's able to get better, because I mean, to me, it's always interesting, especially in football, how much better, assuming you're a young player, you get better from season 1 to season 2 or season 2 to season 3. What are you doing in the offseason to get better, whatever you need to work on, whether it's physical strength, you got to watch more film, depending on your position. So what are you doing to get better in the offseason? For Braxton, he probably hasn't had that opportunity to work on his lower base, unless I'm wrong. And I certainly could be wrong. So that's the key. But, at least they have film on him. They know what he's capable of. They probably think, unless you're a Hall of Fame player, you can upgrade at every position. Right? Everything is on the table. And I like that the staff is coming in without any preconceived, notions that, you're our guy. And, I don't think Caleb Williams' job is in jeopardy. Certain guys like that. But sure. It's a good opportunity to see what you got and go from there.
Yeah, Ben Johnson obviously said there's no depth chart in the spring. Obviously, you could say that. Obviously, we know that Joe Tooney is going to be playing left guard. Jonah Jackson is going to be your right guard, and Drew Dahlman is going to be your center. But I agree with your point about Braxton, where I feel like a lot of his issues were obviously his feet, right? Like his ability to kind of keep up, and the strength that he had in his lower body, and obviously that's hard to work on when you can't work it out. So that will be an interesting point of, how much development was he able to do during the time when he was gone? And I think that'll be a big thing for us to watch once we, kind of get started here at training camp and see, where is he at the starting training camp? Is he going to be limited? Is he going to be a full go? So those will be some interesting things to watch. Since we're talking about injuries here, guys who are injured a little bit, the Bears have not had their first, their top two picks in this year's drafts participate. Obviously, we knew that about Colston Loveland. He's recovering from a shoulder surgery. On Tuesday, he talked to the media. He said that he's pretty close. He needs to just work on a little bit more strength and mobility on that shoulder, but he's been running routes. He's been catching balls. Like, he's been doing that sort of stuff. He just can't participate with the team right now. He said that he'll be good to go on Tuesday. And Luther Burden, obviously, he has not come back since he got injured at the end of rookie minicamp. And Joe, the first thing is, obviously this is not ideal. You don't want your top two picks to not be out there. And Ben Johnson talked about how, like, any player, let alone a rookie, loses a lot by not being out there. It's not even like the coaches trusting you; it's like the teammates trusting you and that sort of stuff. And I think I saw someone ask earlier. I can't remember if it was Rick or it was CJ asking how long before Bears Twitter turns on Luther Burden. It's an interesting question because I saw that PFF report out there that, obviously I think it was 30 second round picks haven't signed their contract yet. Is Luther is his agent telling him, hey, like, maybe don't go out there? Like, obviously you're injured and you don't have a contract. That's speculation. I don't want to feed into that, but I think the biggest thing you can take from all of this right now is your top two picks are losing valuable time right now and development time, and it'll be interesting to see how much that kind of puts them back at the start of training camp.
Well, with Colston Loveland, first of all, I mean, they knew he had the offseason surgery on the shoulder. So they knew he wasn't going to be ready
Yeah.
until the start of camp. So it's important, but then you're saying, we're willing to wait for him. So, but look, he can't, he can't. We can't be waiting until like week 7 or week 8 before he starts to make some significant contributions. You got to go now. You got to win now. So they knew that. So they must think, we're okay with them missing some. As long as they're getting their reps, they're learning the playbook. You know what the guy can do physically. I don't think you need to see much of that. But if he's not ready come August, if he has any setback at all, now that's an issue because I think that is going to set him back. And then with Luther Burden, I don't know. And do we even know an official reason why he's been out? Is it gosh, you
He's
hope it's
called
not.
it a soft tissue issue.
Okay, it's soft tissue because that's worrisome, right? I mean, those can linger for a long time, and you got to be really careful. They do have some depth now at wide receiver, so it's not like we need him day one. I mean, the second round pick, you better hope he contributes. But yeah, and again, we overreact to everything, and it's a great response about how long till Bears Twitter turns on Luther Burden. That's a good question. It's a fair question because that's the way it works. And with everything today in sports, right? With social media, but a little bit. But again, I keep saying it's June. It's June 12th.
Yeah,
It's June
I mean,
12th. Let's pump those brakes again. But we'll see. But they need both those guys. But with Loveland, they knew it wasn't like this was a revelation, not like the Kevin White thing. I know you weren't around here, but that was a wreck. The kid could never
yeah.
get on the field, and surprisingly, he stayed in the league a long time. I don't know, he might be on an NFL roster, amazingly, Kevin White. But so we'll see.
I think the biggest thing is, and I understand there's a lot of talk, obviously, with Shamar Stewart right now with the Bengals, and he's holding out and he's leaving, and obviously he wants to get his contract. And the Bengals aren't the Bears; those are two different I don't think, from what I understand, the Bears are trying to pull one on anyone or anything like that. But I also am I kind of understand, like, yeah, it's valuable time that you're missing, but it is June. Like, Ben Johnson, like, when he was asked, is Luther going to be there for training camp or be ready for day one? And Ben Johnson was like, yeah, he's gonna be there. And like, it's not like Luther Burden isn't at the facilities. Like, everyone was like Ben Johnson said, everyone was at the facilities for mandatory mini camp. There were no holdouts. No one was, not there or anything like that. And if I'm the Bears or even if I'm Luther Burden, like, do I want a soft tissue issue to become a problem for me in training camp if I can just rest it now? And like, you got 6 weeks before training camp. Like, yeah, I know it doesn't look great. And yeah, I know you're obviously losing a lot of valuable reps and that sort of stuff. But I think it's much more valuable for him to be ready for training camp at full speed, no soft tissue issues, than fighting through it for a mini camp or an OTA. Like, I think the training camp and being ready for the season is much more important than just showing up for an OTA or a mini camp. And then you re aggravate something and this becomes a lingering thing instead of just being like, all right, we capped it. It's good. It's healed. Let's get ready to go at the end of July.
No, totally. I mean, and that's the right approach. It's like just not let's not panic and yeah, let's see where we at or where we're at in another 6-7 weeks.
Another offensive talking point, I kind of wanted to talk back a couple of things that we wanted to talk about before we say goodbye. Obviously, the running back room is one of the biggest things that we're kind of looking for. It was the big draft. Are they going to draft one? Are they not? Obviously, they took Kyle Monungai. There were thoughts, are they going to get Nick Chubb? Are they going to get J.K. Dobbins? And obviously, both of those guys didn't go there. And Joe, I think from what we've kind of seen and what we've kind of heard, you mentioned the question about Ben Johnson being asked, who impressed you and over the spring. And one of the four players that he mentioned was Kyle Monungai. Like, he liked the way he looks, he liked the way that he's learning in the classroom, and based on the what we've heard and what we've kind of seen, I think it would be fair to say, and they can sign a veteran on the minimum maybe over the next weeks or at the start of training camp. But I think from what I'm seeing and hearing right now, I think my interpretation is that the Bears are going to keep the running back room that they have, and they're just going to let them go. Whether it's DeAndre Swift kind of taking a step this year, whether it's Kyle Monungai being another seventh rounder from Rutgers making a big impression. Like, it seems from what I hear right now, I think that the Bears are comfortable with what they have in the running back room, and they're just going to see what they have at training camp and see who's going to be able to maybe impress there.
Yeah, I mean, would have been nice to have Ashton Genty, sure, but that wasn't going to happen. The Raiders took him. I think we'll look back when we look back at the Bears 2025 season. I don't think one of the top 2 or 3 reasons, if they have failure, they'll all have failure to what degree. If it's bad failure, again, like we've seen the last few years, it's one of the top reasons will be the running back position really let us down. I think it's nice if you had, a Saquon Barkley or someone like that, but you don't. You addressed a lot of things. You can't address everything. DeAndre Swift will not go down in history as one of the worst Bears running backs in the
Sure.
history of their franchise. He won't. He's a good player. Is he a great player? No, but we've seen what we can do when he's got space. And in theory, again, with the improved offensive line, he should have more space up the middle. So, I don't think that's a major issue. I still would list probably 5 or 6 other things that are more of an issue than running back. And as far as Kyle Monungai or whether it's Roshan Johnson, you just need that second guy to be a complimentary guy, right? Because DeAndre is going to be the main guy coming out of the backfield. So if Monungai can give you a spark, whether it's in some short yardage situations or third down plays, wonderful. But that's all you really need for the guy. No one expects Kyle Monungai to come in and rush for 1,200 yards and supplant DeAndre Swift as the number 1 running back on the team.
I was going to ask you that because I was curious, just based on, it again, with the preface that it's May and June, obviously, that you're not seeing full blocking, you're not seeing full pressure, all that sort of stuff. But do you think there's a world where Kyle Monungai could potentially jump up there and, middle of the season, maybe starts getting those, snaps over DeAndre Swift? Like, do you think that there's any credence to it at this point, or do you think, like, listen, like, maybe we're making too much of a comparison to Pacheco, obviously, in Kansas City because he's a seventh rounder out of Rutgers? But I'm just curious to know, like, what are your expectations at this point for what Kyle Monungai can add to this running back room?
Yeah, I mean, the comparison to Pacheco, I think, is a little unfair. Pacheco's fast and darty. He's got that burst. Monungai isn't a burner. He's not going to break one off for 70 yards. from what I understand, and you've seen him out there. But he's an intriguing player. But again, if you're counting on a seventh round pick, and I know it was a deep running back, draft. So maybe in another year, maybe he would have been a fourth rounder or maybe a fifth rounder,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if you're relying on a seventh round pick. I think whatever you get out of him is icing on the cake. I mean, that's just gravy to me. He'd be a heck of a nice story, and I'm sure he'll. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he had some flash moments, during the course of the season. I do think he'll get some action. But then, what does that mean for Roshan Johnson? Is Roshan now like tossing him to the side? Now it was only he was drafted 2 years ago, right? Part of that
Yep.
2023 group. So I don't know if Roshan had some moments last year, especially on the goal line. But I think they could. I think that's to me. It's almost like, is that the question? Is Monungai going to be the number 2 running back and not Roshan? So I guess maybe that's something to watch going forward.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think the biggest thing we've learned about the NFL is you don't need to be a first or second round pick running back to make an impact. Obviously, last year you saw Bucky Irving, from the area. Obviously, what he was able to do with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think if you're able to block, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think DeAndre Swift will obviously benefit from that. Roshan Johnson will benefit from that. But I think at this point right now, I think Kyle Monungai could make an impact, and I am confident in his ability and what he's going to be able to do. Again, I have the right to take that back if I see something in training camp and all that sort of stuff. But I think that Kyle Monungai could potentially make a bigger impact than maybe we thought he could when they got him in the 7th round. I see a lot of different guys are coming in there. I see Robert is back. Hey, Robert, great to see you. Swift is going to ball out this year, I think. I think he'll do I think that'll be really interesting. Dr. Earl is in the chat. We got King Buka World. Guys, we've got a few more minutes left on the live stream. So if you have any more questions, we're happy to answer them or kind of talk about it. I think Rick asked early, when is the first day of training camp? The Bears haven't officially announced that yet, but my interpretation is it's probably going to be sometime in the second to last week of July. That's kind of been what they've been doing recently. I think, we'll have 6 weeks, a little bit off of here before we kind of get things going here. But this is the most interesting time of the year because I think this 6 weeks is literally the only time in the calendar year where the NFL isn't the number one topic, right? Like even during the offseason, we're talking about free agency, coaching hirings, GM hirings, drafting, combine, owners meetings, rules changes, all this different stuff. Like the NFL has mastered the offseason so well where we're constantly talking about it like no other sport. But I think this 6 weeks is the only 6 weeks when we don't talk about football and we were kind of like, all right, as long as no one gets arrested, no one gets in trouble, like no one is going to be talking about the NFL for the 6 weeks.
Yeah, but you'll find something to write about, Michael.
Well, I have
just,
to, sure,
just
yeah.
like Sean Hammond, you have to, right? And that's the tough part of being the beat writer. What are we writing about on July 8th for July 9th? And
Yeah.
that's hard. But you're right. And so let's just enjoy summer a little bit, right? It's finally being consistently warm. As I say, that'll probably be 40 degrees next week in Chicago. But let's enjoy summer, and then before you know it, but I mean, who isn't excited to see what this Ben Johnson offense is going to look like? I mean, we all are. I mean, in a way, I want the season opener to be this weekend, but then again, I want to enjoy summer a little bit too, don't you?
Yeah, it would be nice to enjoy summer at least a little bit. It's funny because I feel like we love football. Obviously, we're all ready for it, but it would be nice to just enjoy the summer a little bit, enjoy the warm weather before things get pretty cold out there. Sports Chicago Style is asking the number one question that this podcast cares about: how did Tyler Scott do on the field? As you know, this is the Tyler Scott fan podcast here. A lot of supporters of Tyler Scott on this podcast.
Is he still on
I
the
will.
team?
He is still on the team, Joe. I will say, um, Tyler's. I will say I don't think Tyler Scott has made himself noticeable. I don't think he's made whether that's good or bad. I think
Bad.
for right now he's just kind of there, and I don't. I think you know. I think he's just kind of there. He's a special teamer at this point. Maybe he'll get you a couple balls, but there hasn't really been too many opportunities for him right now. I do think that um, one of the bigger things that I've kind of noticed over the over over the spring period is that Caleb is going to rely on that number three receiver, whoever that is, whether it's Olamade, whether it's other guys, whether it is going to be Luther Burden the third. That third wide receiver is going to be important for Caleb, especially if Rome and DJ kind of take some time to get open. So that is going to be something to kind of look forward here. But Joe, we'll do a few more minutes here if we get any more last questions. But I am curious to see. I'm going to do a series over the next month. Top position battles. Who has the most to prove? Most under kind of looked player. And I'm curious, like who. I think we both agree that the left tackle is probably your top position battle, right? Like I think that's obviously the most important. I am curious, we'll get more into the training camp preview stuff in a month here, but who do you feel like over this next couple months has the most to prove on the Bears? Is it Caleb Williams to show that he is the franchise quarterback that everyone expects him? Is it a DJ Moore, a Roma Dunze, a Montez Sweat? Like there are a lot of guys who have a lot to prove after a 5-12 season last year, but I'm curious to know like some food for thought over the next month as we kind of say goodbye for the next month. But who do you think has a lot to prove once training camp gets started here at the end of July?
That's a great question. So it's not Zach Pickens, is that what you're telling me? Yeah, I was going to
Unfortunately
ask you
not.
who's going to get cut first, Tyler Scott or Zach Pickens?
I am not getting into the business of cutting people out here, Joe.
It's only June. That's a great question, though. Like, who has the most to prove? You hate to take the obvious answer because it's the quarterback. But again, even if he has, but you know how he overreacted, especially to the quarterback. So if he just does what he does last year, Caleb, that's not good enough. We can all agree on that. I expect him to be better. I expect Roma Dunze's numbers to be better. Who has the most to prove, though? It's kind of unfair to the rookies because it's year one, and we haven't even seen Loveland in pads yet, or
Sure.
because of the shoulder. Defensively, this is kind of just a random thought here. I need to see more from Tremaine Edmonds. I don't think he had a great year last season. He did pick off Caleb Williams, in that little scrimmage there.
Yeah.
So thumbs up right away to Tremaine Edmonds. I think he's got to show more. And the defensive front, I mean, it really doesn't matter in a way who starts because they're going to rotate so many guys in. But certain guys have to, deliver. And Odangbo, I think, is a name that, they're all talking about the potential. And he was getting to the quarterback, but he wasn't getting a lot of sacks.
Sure.
Well, and they didn't get the other, proven pass rusher to complement Montez Sweat, who also is another name to think about because he didn't have a great 2024 either. But we got to see production from Odangbo this season, not like, in camp necessarily, but when it starts to matter, is he going to be the guy? Is he the perfect complement, or is he just a guy who's just going to be a mid player and he's good, but he's never going to be great, and he's 10 years you'll forget that he was on the team. Is he going to be that guy, or is he going to make an impact? So they paid a lot of money. They kind of made him the top defensive priority, right? Unless I'm missing somebody
Yeah.
as far as their offseason signings. So I think he's a guy who we need to see production and not just potential, because as we all know in any sport, production is potential is what gets coaches fired.
Right. I would definitely agree with that. And Rick, thank you, Rick, for bringing this up. I completely forgot about this. How does Brisker look, and can he handle? How can he make it a full season? We did get a chance to talk to Jaquan Brisker for the first time since he had his concussion situation that kind of kept him out the last 12 weeks. He said he feels good. He obviously called it a very dark time, obviously a tough situation. He talked about how he retrained his brain a little bit, which I was kind of like, what do you mean? How do you retrain your brain? But he saw this doctor at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and I forget the exact name of what type of concussion it was. It's escaping my mind right now. But he had a certain type of concussion, and the doctor kind of taught him like, hey, like you can retrain your brain from this concussion, like by doing side to side movements, training your eyes, catching a tennis ball. And Jaquan really dedicated himself his offseason to doing that, and he's getting back there. And he was asked whether he thought about retiring. He said no, that was never a thought. He said, is he going to change the way he plays football? He said no, and obviously they didn't have the pads on, but Jaquan Brisker made himself known during these practices, these 7-on-7s, whether it was his play or whether it's his mouth. Obviously, he likes to talk a lot on the field and kind of gets that defense going. But it's great to see Jaquan Brisker back out there. It's great to see that he's healthy and that he's going to go a full way. And Brisker let us know that he's not changing who he is as a player, and he is going to play the same style of football that kind of made him a really elite player when he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take the football player out of the football player, right? I mean, and Jaquan is at his best when he's coming downhill at the line of scrimmage and being a physical player. I mean, he has to be that player. Otherwise, why are you on the team? I don't know how productive he can be. So he's going to have to play the way he's always played. And if he gets concussed again in week 2 and he's out for the year again, you knew this was a potential scenario. That's why I really wanted to see them draft a safety high. They know better, right? They should know better than me. I hope they're right, and I hope he's fine because, Michael, you know better than me. He's a very likable player. I understand his teammates like him, fans
Yeah.
love him. I love Jaquan Brisker. I mean, he's got Pro Bowl potential, but he's got to be on the field to do that. And it's too bad because he can be a dynamic player. But if this concussions thing crops up again or he gets another one, the whole thing about retraining your brain thing, that's fascinating to me. But
Yeah.
I know if you bang heads with another guy who's going really fast and who's really big, you can forget about training your brain things. It's going to hurt. It's probably going to be bad.
Yeah, and obviously, once you have one concussion, you're much more susceptible to having more concussions in the future. King Buka asked, "Hope he wears the Guardian cap." He did. He has been wearing them at practices. Obviously, a lot of guys who have had previous concussions before wear the Guardian caps. Obviously, you can wear those in games now, and I would assume he didn't talk about it. He didn't bring it up, but I would assume he would wear them in games. If you could do anything to kind of help protect yourself, I think a player would do that. All right, we're gonna get out of here, guys. We had a good conversation today. Thank you to everyone who joined our live stream. It was great to hear from all of you guys. It was great to get all your comments and your questions. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you're listening to our podcast, make sure you're checking out Keeping Up with Us. We like to do these live streams, and if you want to join the conversation, check out when we're going to be doing these live, and you can get your question answered or be part of the conversation as well. Obviously, like I said, we've got roughly 6 weeks now until the training camp is going to be starting. We'll probably start talking to you folks like the week before training camp, kind of get you ready, get us back into Bears mode. But Joe and I are going to enjoy the summer at least a little bit here for a couple of weeks for the next month. Maybe we'll come back if there is like any stadium news. Obviously, that could be the only. I think that's the biggest way the
Yeah.
Bears will probably make news over the next month. Maybe they want to put out that stadium news before training camp gets started to get everyone excited for the season. But we're going to take the next month off, but then we're going to be ready to go once training camp start. And we're hoping that you guys will join us once we kind of get back into the swing of things here at the end of July. But thanks so much for joining us this week, folks. I hope you guys have a good kind of rest of your summer, and we will talk to you folks down the road.
See ya.